The glittering illusion of modern prominence often conceals a far more complex and unsettling reality, where the boundaries between personal agency and calculated influence become dangerously blurred. In the contemporary landscape of global celebrity, we are frequently presented with carefully curated narratives of liberation, independence, and the pursuit of a self-determined destiny far away from the rigid constraints of traditional systems. Yet, beneath the polished surface of high-profile departures and highly publicized reinventions, a different story frequently begins to emerge, one characterized by profound isolation, the systematic dismantling of lifelong relationships, and the unsettling perception of psychological reconfiguration. When an individual who once embodied a vibrant, unscripted, and universally appealing persona suddenly undergoes a radical transformation, adopting an entirely new lexicon and an estranged stance toward their origins, the public is left to grapple with a difficult question. We must consider whether we are witnessing a genuine journey of personal enlightenment or if we are observing the precise step-by-step manifestation of an asymmetric dynamic of control, wherein one partner systematically overwrites the fundamental identity of the other behind the impenetrable defense of a carefully constructed exterior. This phenomenon becomes particularly striking when it unfolds on the grandest possible stage, involving figures whose lives have been deeply woven into the cultural fabric of an entire nation. The transition from a position of historical reverence and communal affection to a state of remote, defensive insulation often signals a deeper systemic imbalance within the private sphere. When an individual is entirely severed from their established support network, separated from lifelong companions, and distanced from the foundational family unit that sustained them through profound personal grief, the resulting void is rarely left unoccupied. In many instances, this vacuum is filled by a dominant, highly strategic presence that seeks to reprogram the individual, substituting authentic personal history with a specialized, highly commercialized vocabulary of modern wellness and ideological conformity. If the positions were reversed in any standard societal context, if a high-profile individual were suddenly removed from their ancestral home, completely isolated from their long-standing social circle, and confined within a remote estate hidden behind massive walls of dense greenery, the collective response would be one of immediate and urgent concern. The public would naturally look past the superficial messaging of empowerment and recognize the classic, unmistakable indicators of an emotionally restrictive and deeply unbalanced relationship. To fully understand how these intricate dynamics of perception and interpersonal influence shape the global narratives that captivate millions daily, it is essential to remain closely connected with detailed, analytical examinations of these evolving events. If you find value in these deep investigations into the hidden mechanics of public life and the psychological underpinnings of modern cultural shifts, please take a brief moment to support the channel by subscribing, ensuring you never miss the comprehensive breakdowns that unpack the truth behind the headlines. As we observe these public figures from a distance, the visible indicators of behavioral modification become increasingly difficult for the global audience to ignore, particularly when the resulting public conduct feels entirely antithetical to the individual's original character. The once free-spirited, universally engaging persona is replaced by a rigid, predictable adherence to a highly specific strain of contemporary cultural rhetoric, a shift that many observers view not as personal growth but as a form of ideological capture. This complete alteration of behavior creates a profound sense of dissonance for those who remember the individual as they once were. sparking widespread debate about the invisible pressures operating behind the scenes of this highly publicized exile. The growing skepticism surrounding this dramatic transformation is further amplified by the erratic and contradictory nature of the public appearances put forth by this displaced partnership. Interviews that are intended to project absolute confidence and moral superiority often come across as deeply strained, unnatural, and entirely disconnected from the genuine sentiments of the audience they are attempting to reach. Instead of fostering connection, these highly rehearsed, alienating presentations tend to generate an atmosphere of intense scrutiny and mounting resistance, particularly within the home territory that the individual abandoned. The perception that a cherished national figure has been effectively commodified, transformed into a vessel for alien concepts and commercial ambitions, creates a deep and lasting resentment among a public that values authenticity above all else. This resentment is not merely a reaction to differing viewpoints, but a direct response to what many perceive as a betrayal of a foundational identity, orchestrated by a highly controlling partner who remains determined to dictate the terms of every interaction with the outside world, as the distance between the isolated couple and their former life continues to widen. The narrative begins to shift from one of triumphant independence to one of calculated survival and diminishing returns. The initial fascination with their departure inevitably gives way to a critical evaluation of their current trajectory, as the public realizes that the continuous hostility toward their origins may not be a sign of strength, but a tactical necessity designed to sustain media relevance. The underlying tension of this dynamic lies in the realization that without the very institution they chose to reject, their public standing begins to erode, leaving them trapped in a cycle of dependency on the very headlines they claim to despise. This complex intersection of personal transformation, domestic imbalance, and strategic public positioning sets the stage for a dramatic confrontation with reality. As the boundaries of public patience are tested and the necessity for a radical realignment becomes overwhelmingly apparent, forcing a re-examination of the true motives driving their next move. The delicate balance of public sympathy begins to shatter entirely when the strategic maneuvers of a deeply isolated partnership shift from rhetorical defensive posturing to the direct deployment of family dynamics as an absolute protective shield against public hostility. As rumors intensify regarding a highly calculated return to the ancestral homeland, the focus shifts directly toward the potential weaponization of innocence, specifically the tactical inclusion of young children in a highly volatile public arena. This strategy presents a profound ethical dilemma that has deeply divided observers and media analysts across the globe. The underlying premise of this maneuver relies on the absolute certainty that the public, regardless of its intense grievances or lingering resentment toward the parents, will maintain a strict standard of decorum and restraint in the presence of young children. By bringing the next generation into the immediate line of fire, the couple constructs an invisible yet highly effective barrier against the vocal disapproval and public rejection that would otherwise greet them upon their arrival. This calculated exploitation of societal boundaries reveals a desperate willingness to leverage familial bonds for immediate public relations protection, a move that critics argue represents a new low in the ongoing struggle for mainstream validation and social survival. However, the execution of such a provocative strategy is fraught with immense logistical complications and psychological risks, particularly within an environment defined by an exceptionally aggressive and relentless media landscape. The domestic press corps, long renowned for its unparalleled ability to breach the most sophisticated defenses, poses an immediate and unavoidable threat to any carefully managed strategy of selective visibility. While established editorial guidelines and voluntary industry regulations within the homeland generally prevent local publications from intruding upon the privacy of minors or printing unauthorized photographs of children, these ethical boundaries do not extend to the international media market. Aggressive independent operators and global paparazzi agencies, driven by the immense financial value of capturing unverified, authentic glimpses of these protected children, operate entirely outside the jurisdiction of domestic press agreements. Consequently, any attempt to parade the family in public as a shield against hostility is almost guaranteed to trigger a chaotic media frenzy, effectively stripping away the layer of total privacy that the parents have so fiercely claimed to protect in their self-imposed exile. This paradox highlights the deep-scale emotional leverage and strategic calculation that underpins the entire narrative of a potential family reconciliation. The decision to shield the children entirely from the public eye or to use them as a tool for public rehabilitation represents a high-stakes gamble that carries severe long-term consequences for the family's broader financial and social standing. Analysts note that the sudden urgency to re-establish physical proximity with the core institution of the homeland is driven not by a genuine desire for emotional healing, but by an acute financial necessity to recalibrate and reignite a rapidly deteriorating commercial brand. The global enterprise established by the couple relies entirely on their perceived connection to the traditional hierarchy they chose to abandon. And as that connection grows increasingly distant, their marketability experiences a catastrophic decline. To counteract this loss of relevance, the couple must generate fresh, highly compelling narratives that place them back within the orbit of the central institution, utilizing brief interactions, shared properties, and public associations to rebuild the specific media profile required to sustain their lavish lifestyle. This blatant reliance on the prestige of the abandoned institution for financial survival creates an intense sense of confusion, alienation, and betrayal among their most dedicated ideological supporters. For years, a fierce global following has defended the couple's radical departure, buying into a narrative that painted the central institution as an inherently toxic, culturally regressive, and deeply damaging environment that actively threatened their safety and mental well-being. These supporters aggressively championed the couple's absolute rejection of their heritage, operating under the assumption that the separation was a permanent, principled stance against systemic injustice. Now, as the couple initiates a desperate effort to reintegrate themselves into the very structure they publicly condemned, their core fan base is left to grapple with an irreconcilable contradiction. The sudden pursuit of a high-profile reunion forces these loyal defenders to question the validity of the original grievances, exposing a profound disconnect between the couple's stated principles and their actual commercial motivations, leaving their global movement profoundly fractured and increasingly disillusioned. The rapid erosion of media traction and public interest is further accelerated by a series of high-profile commercial failures that have fundamentally undermined the couple's credibility as independent cultural influencers. Recent data indicates a severe and steady decline in their overall popularity, with international audiences increasingly viewing them as highly repetitive, uninteresting, and fundamentally disconnected from the realities of everyday life. The ongoing media fascination with their personal grievances has reached a point of absolute exhaustion, causing traditional press coverage to shrink dramatically as the public shifts its attention toward more relevant and authentic figures. Without the continuous generation of conflict or the high visibility association with the central institution, the couple's independent ventures are left to stand entirely on their own merit. A reality that has proven to be disastrous for their corporate partnerships and long-term financial security. This dramatic loss of media momentum has created an environment of intense pressure behind closed doors, forcing a radical re-evaluation of their strategic approach as they realize that their current trajectory is leading toward total cultural irrelevance and financial collapse. The desperation of this commercial decline is perfectly illustrated by the catastrophic performance of the lifestyle and retail ventures launched with immense public relations fanfare but minimal operational substance. Initial projections of creating a multi-billion-dollar global lifestyle brand have dissolved into a harsh reality of plummeting digital traffic, unsold inventory, and severe logistical mismanagement. Statistical reports reveal that digital engagement and platform traffic plummeted by a staggering 33% within a matter of months, signaling a profound lack of sustained consumer interest in the highly priced, mundane domestic products offered by the brand, relying on the mistaken belief that celebrity status alone would guarantee immediate and overwhelming market success. Vast amounts of capital were invested in securing enormous quantities of retail stock, filling commercial warehouses with perishable items and luxury household goods that consumers have completely ignored. With expiration dates rapidly approaching and consumer demand virtually non-existent, retail experts predict devastating financial losses, marking the venture as an absolute failure that severely jeopardizes the couple's remaining economic stability. This commercial disaster forces a reluctant admission that the independent business model chosen by the partnership is fundamentally flawed, exposing a complete lack of understanding regarding market dynamics and consumer behavior. The attempt to market ordinary, low-cost domestic items at astronomical luxury prices, under the assumption that a high-profile name could transform everyday goods into highly coveted status symbols, has encountered absolute rejection from a highly discerning public. When faced with direct questions regarding the unique value proposition or substance of these offerings, the responses put forth by the brand have been widely criticized as completely superficial, repetitive, and entirely devoid of genuine business vision. This operational failure leaves the couple with very few remaining options, driving them back toward their default strategy of chasing high-visibility media attention through any means necessary. In order to salvage their personal brand and maintain their position as global influencers, they are forced to orchestrate a dramatic return to the public eye, hoping that a highly publicized reconciliation will generate the positive press and media inches required to rescue their failing financial empire. The final resolution of this protracted international saga demands a comprehensive examination of the deeply ingrained personal histories, structural realities, and long-term consequences that continue to shape the actions of this highly visible partnership. To truly appreciate the scale of the current crisis, one must look closely at the foundational biography of the individual who was once the nation's most beloved, fun-loving, and fiercely protected figure. Raised in the intense, unyielding glare of global media scrutiny, his early life was permanently defined by an unimaginable tragedy that unfolded before the eyes of millions. The sudden, catastrophic loss of his mother during his formative years left a profound, indelible scar on his psyche, a vulnerability that would permanently shape his relationship with the public, the press, and the historic institution into which he was born. For decades, the public extended an extraordinary degree of grace, affection, and latitude to this individual, celebrating his military service, his charismatic approachability, and his seemingly authentic connection to ordinary citizens. He was viewed as the vibrant, modern heartbeat of an ancient system, a man whose personal struggles only served to make him more relatable and deeply cherished by a global audience that genuinely wished for his ultimate happiness and fulfillment. However, The trajectory of this life underwent a total and irreversible realignment upon the introduction of an entirely foreign element from across the Atlantic. The individual who would become his partner entered the historic structure with a highly specific background, rooted firmly in the hyper-competitive, self-promotional world of commercial entertainment and digital media. Raised in a completely different cultural paradigm, her biography was characterized by a relentless drive for individual prominence, a deep familiarity with the mechanics of public relations, and a foundational belief in the absolute primacy of personal branding over institutional duty. From the moment these two distinct worlds collided, a fundamental friction was set in motion as the collective, duty-bound traditions of an ancient heritage were systematically challenged by a highly individualized, transactional approach to modern celebrity. The subsequent union did not lead to a harmonious integration of these two philosophies. Instead, it resulted in the rapid, systematic dismantling of the individual's lifelong connections, culminating in an unprecedented public renunciation of his birthright and a complete retreat behind the heavily fortified walls of a private estate in California. This geographic and emotional exile was explicitly framed to the public as a courageous pursuit of absolute liberty, mental preservation, and financial independence. Yet, as the years have progressed, the stark reality of this self-imposed isolation has revealed a deeply troubling dynamic that looks less like liberation and far more like an aggressive, total psychological reconfiguration. Observers who have closely monitored the couple's public behavior note that the individual appears to have been entirely emptied of his original personality, replaced by a highly programmed persona that speaks exclusively in the artificial, scripted vocabulary of contemporary wellness culture and ideological conformity. The profound irony of this transformation lies in the fact that, in his desperate attempt to escape what he was led to believe was a restrictive and toxic institutional environment, he has seemingly entered into an asymmetric domestic arrangement characterized by absolute submission, where his partner dictates every strategic move, every corporate partnership, and every public statement. The energetic, independent figure of the past has been effectively transformed into a vehicle for his partner's commercial ambitions. Executing a series of repetitive, alienating media campaigns that have systematically destroyed his standing in his homeland, the profound cultural and economic consequences of this strategic failure are now manifesting on a global scale, as the couple faces the stark reality of an empty treasury and a rapidly dwindling pool of public goodwill. The core issue driving their current desperation is the realization that their independent commercial value is non-existent when severed completely from the prestige and authority of the historic institution they chose to vilify. The various multimedia contracts, book deals, and high-visibility lifestyle ventures that were launched with immense arrogance have all suffered from a complete lack of substance, resulting in catastrophic financial losses and a total collapse of consumer confidence. The revelation that their highly publicized retail venture is facing absolute ruin, with commercial warehouses overflowing with expiring, overpriced goods that a discerning public refuses to purchase, serves as a definitive turning point in their narrative. This operational disaster represents a total admission of failure, stripping away the illusion of their corporate brilliance and leaving them with only one viable option for economic survival: a forced, calculated attempt to re-establish a physical and narrative connection with the homeland they so publicly abandoned. This realization sets the stage for a highly anticipated, deeply cynical maneuver that many experts view as a final, desperate roll of the dice by a family in profound financial and reputational distress. The proposed return to the ancestral soil is driven not by a genuine sense of remorse, familial affection, or a desire for quiet reconciliation, but by an absolute necessity to generate positive press coverage and rebuild their rapidly eroding media profile. The strategy relies entirely on exploiting the public's natural curiosity and the media's insatiable appetite for conflict, using the mere possibility of a reunion with the head of the institution to dominate global headlines and drive digital traffic back to their failing commercial platforms. By orchestrating brief public appearances, staying within traditional properties, and subtly hinting at private discussions, the couple hopes to manufacture a renewed sense of relevance that can be instantly monetized in the international market, effectively converting their ancestral heritage into a renewable source of advertising revenue to sustain their lavish lifestyle. Yet, this calculated gamble faces an almost insurmountable barrier in the form of a deeply resentful and exhausted domestic public that is entirely unwilling to extend a friendly reception to a couple they perceive as profoundly hypocritical. The citizens of the homeland, who watched for years as their most sacred traditions and respected figures were subjected to continuous, unprovoked public attacks, view this sudden pursuit of a reunion with immense skepticism and absolute disdain. The widespread perception that the couple is attempting to use their innocent children as a human shield to deflect vocal public disapproval and prevent a hostile reception only serves to deepen the collective anger. This tactical deployment of the next generation represents a profound violation of ethical boundaries, highlighting the extreme lengths to which the partnership is willing to go to secure temporary public relations protection. The resulting atmosphere is one of intense, simmering tension as a proud nation prepares to confront a couple that has consistently chosen to prioritize individual financial gain over institutional respect, family loyalty, and basic national pride in the final analysis. The unfolding tragedy of this high-profile exile serves as a powerful cautionary tale regarding the destructive nature of modern celebrity culture and the high cost of sacrificing authentic heritage for the fleeting illusion of digital prominence. The continuous trajectory of this partnership has demonstrated that when an individual allows their foundational identity, lifelong relationships, and cultural roots to be systematically erased by a controlling and highly strategic influence, the resulting void cannot be filled by superficial marketing campaigns or corporate platitudes. The systematic collapse of their independent business model, the deep alienation of their core ideological supporters, and the absolute hostility of their former homeland all point toward a definitive, unavoidable conclusion. The couple remains hopelessly trapped in a self-made paradox, entirely dependent for their very survival on the historic institution they attempted to destroy, forcing them into a permanent cycle of desperate maneuvers that only serve to highlight their complete cultural irrelevance and final, undeniable failure on the global stage.